So this unit is all about animation, and what we'll be doing is trying to develop your skills as an animator using relevant and up-to-date tools to provide an insight into the range of digital media products and destinations into which animation work fits. So in our case, we're going to be animating for games. The purpose of the unit is to provide an opportunity to create animated assets, as mentioned, for a game. What you will end up doing is animating a static image or a shape inside Unity. And in our case, the very simple task will be to create a bouncing ball in Unity. So, the tools for animation. Some of the main ones which are free to use are Blender, Pencil 2D, and the aforementioned Unity. Obviously, there are more expensive and more sort of industry standard professional tools such as Maya. Pixar also has an animation tool for use in their own studio. So, what are the 5 types of animation? First of all, you've got traditional animation, which is also known as cell animation. And these are the cartoons, the old Disney cartoons that you would have seen, where somebody actually hand draws every single scene. So for 12 frames, you'd have 12 different pictures. And they would kind of use a light box and a sort of clear plastic cell in order to draw on top of it and then draw something else to create the movement. Extremely time consuming. Next we've got 2D vector-based animation, which is a bit more popular nowadays with cartoons like Family Guy. Then you have 3D computer animation, which obviously is the go-to for all the big studios at the moment, Pixar and DreamWorks. All of those kind of movies are obviously made using computer animation. Again, extremely time consuming. You'll probably get through a second or two's worth of footage in a week. The next type is motion graphics. So all of the kind of things that you see on news and in sports. It's used a lot on television, and it kind of just manipulates shapes in order to create these kind of overlays for sports and these little snippets for TV. Next comes stop motion, so things like Wallace and Gromit, and a lot of the other kind of claymation style cartoons are made this way. There's also 6 different subtypes of stop motion. Let's take a quick look at those 5 types of animation in this short film.
We'll start off with traditional animation. You might call it 2D animation, but I actually place 2D in a different category, and you'll see why later in the video. Traditional animation, sometimes referred to as cell animation, is one of the older forms of animation. In it, the animator draws every frame to create the animation sequence, just like they used to do in the old days at Disney. If you've ever had one of those flip books when you were a kid, you'll know what I mean. Sequential drawings, screened quickly one after another, create the illusion of movement. Traditional animation consists of hand drawings, called frames. In the past, the drawing occurred on a big light table, which is basically a drafting table with a big light panel in the middle of it, on which the animator drew the sequence. The light enabled the animator to see his previous drawings through the paper to get a better look of his animation. This is called onion skinning. Nowadays, even traditional animation is being done mostly on computers by using a tablet like the Wacom Cintiq. 2D or traditional animation is usually animated on 12 frames per second, with occasional faster actions animated on 24 frames per second. Japanese animation, however, is known to be animated on a lower frame rate in most cases. Next on the list is 2D animation. When I talk about 2D animation, I'm referring to vector-based animation, like the ones done in Flash. This style has become very popular in the last decade, with the increasing amount of people doing it due to the accessibility of the technology. Flash is cheap and easy to use. Such are other vector-based animation programs. The reason I place 2D animation in a different category is that in addition to the option of animating frame by frame, an animator has an option of creating rigs for the characters and then moving the body parts individually instead of drawing the character over and over again. After Effects allows you to create complex rigs for animation, or use the puppet tool to drag and move body parts around. These flexibilities give beginners more option when approaching animation, especially if drawing isn't their strong suit, unlike traditional animation where drawing skills are mandatory. The third type is 3D animation, also known as computer animation, or honestly just animation at this point, since this is the most common form of animation today, just like traditional animation used to just be called animation 30 years ago. 3D animation, however, works in a completely different way than traditional animation. They both require an understanding of the same principles of movement and composition, but the technical skill set is very different for each task. Like I've mentioned before, while in the past you had to be an amazing draftsman to be an animator, with computer animation that is not the case. 3D animation is more similar to playing with puppets rather than drawing. The animator moves the character in a 3D program with special controls that are connected to each body part, such as hands, elbows, lips, etc., and then sets a keyframe when all the body parts are in the right position. They proceed to move forward in time and move all these controls again to create another keyframe. The computer then calculates the journey the body parts is going through between each of those keyframes. A 3D animator will spend most of their time looking at curves that represent the movement of different body parts over time. Another big difference with 3D animation is that, unlike traditional animation, the character's body parts are always present and should be taken into consideration. Let me explain. When animating in 2D, the character has to be drawn for every frame. When the character is viewed from the side, half of its body isn't shown and thus isn't drawn. It technically does not exist. It's drawn on a flat page, and there isn't really more to the character other than what the animator draws. With 3D though, the character's body parts always exist in the shot. Even when one hand isn't visible, it's still there. That adds some work for the animator, since we need to be aware of the entire character at all times. The last major difference with 3D animation is the frame rate. Like I said before, traditional animators usually work on twos, which means they draw a new drawing every 2 frames, and thus having one drawing last for 2 frames. With 3D animation, however, the motion is always smooth, except for stylized pieces which intentionally try to look different. Having a character stop completely looks like a mistake in 3D. Even when the character is standing still, there should always be some sign of life. This is something 2D animation can get away with much more easily than 3D. Number 4 on our list is motion graphics. While still considered a form of animation, motion graphics is rather different than the other types of animation on the list. Mostly because, unlike the other types, it is not character or story driven. It is the art of creatively moving graphic elements or text, usually for commercial or promotional purposes. Think animated logos, explainer videos, app commercial, television promos, or even film opening titles. The skills for motion graphics don't necessarily translate to the other types of animation, since they don't require knowledge of body mechanics or acting, but they do have some attributes in common, such as understanding good composition and the all-important camera motion. Last but not least is stop motion. Stop motion is a special form of animation that combines live-action filmmaking principles with traditional character animation. Stop motion is done by taking a photo of an object and then moving it just a little bit and taking another photo. The process is then repeated, and when the photos are played back one after another, they give the illusion of movement. This is similar to traditional animation, but it uses real-life material instead of drawings. Let's look at some different styles of stop motion. One of the most popular form is claymation, working with clay or Play-Doh characters that can easily be manipulated for animation. Advanced claymation, as seen in the Neverhood or Armycrog, uses metal skeletons on which the clay is then molded for more sturdy rigs. Some animators would use regular puppets instead of clay ones, usually also built upon some sort of skeleton rig. The faces of the characters can be replaced based on the expressions or be controlled within the rig. Another popular form of stop motion is cutout, using construction paper or cardboard characters and placing them on paper while shooting the animation from above. That's how South Park was originally made before they switched to computers. Similar to cutout animation, silhouette animation uses cardboard or some kind of flat material, but the objects are all dark and the shot is depicted with silhouettes only. This is one of the oldest forms of stop motion and is rarely used today. Some use action figures or Lego characters for animation. This genre is very popular on YouTube, with many channels dedicated to creating funny skits with Lego characters. Robot Chicken is a great example of that. They use famous action figures to make fun of pop culture. Then there's pixelation, a form of stop motion that uses real people and real environments to create unreal videos. It uses the stop motion method of taking a still photo, moving things around and then taking another photo, but the subject matter is usually real people instead of puppets.
Next we have the 12 principles of animation. These were they're not necessarily rules, but they're just good practice which were laid out by the original animators for Disney. And they include things like squash and stretch, which is the technique you'll be using to make your bouncing ball inside Unity. Anticipation, so this is kind of like, when an old cartoon you would see the Roadrunner kind of pull back and then start running. Staging is kind of like putting everything into place. A lot of these are very sort of self-explanatory. Let's take a look at this short animation about the 12 principles of animation. One of your tasks in this unit is to use either Unity or Blender to create a bouncing ball using this squash and stretch animation principle. So you can see from the drawing here on the presentation that you kind of have this slow in, fast in the middle, bounce and squash on the floor, and so on. Some of the key terms in animation, things like onion skinning. So this is where you can see your last frame and you can then draw on top of it for the next frame. Keyframes, these are the kind of key positions that you want your animation to be in. So with your bouncing ball, it might last for a second, so you want to put a keyframe at half a second with the ball on the floor. Rigging. Rigging is when you set up the bones and the legs and the kind of skeleton structure of a 3D model, usually a character, and then you can manipulate those around inside the programs. Texturing is what the material looks like on top of your 3D model. Lighting, fairly obvious. You can light different things in scenes inside Unity and also Blender. Polygons are the small triangular shapes that kind of make up every single 3D model that you make inside Blender, also known as polys. UV mapping. So bottom right of this screen you can see that cube has been kind of unwrapped. So it's a bit like if you had a cardboard box and you took it apart, that box would then make a shape, a bit like a sort of cross shape. Okay, here's some more key terms which is used in 3D modeling. A mesh. A mesh is the actual shape that you end up with in the end, which is made up of all your different polygons. Materials. So if you wanted to make something look like wood, you could use an image of wood. to put that on as a material. Polygons we already went through. Extrude is a kind of way that you pull things out inside Blender. If you look at a couple of tutorials introducing you to 3D modeling, you'll see a lot of key sort of terms like grabbing something, extruding it, and extracting things. So, you know, bouncing balls are good and everything, but if you'd want to go a little bit further and you want to increase your grade a little bit, also you might be finding animation quite enjoyable, then, you know, see if you can create a walk cycle for a rigged humanoid character. So you could do this either inside a Piskel app with a 2D sprite, or you could download a character from the asset store which is already rigged, bring it into Unity and have a go at seeing if you can make it walk. So you will find all of the resources that you need inside the unit materials document, and this is going to give you all the information and all the links in order to be able to fill out the task sheet for this unit. So thank you very much for listening.